Our speaker tonight is Edgar Krasa, who survived several Nazi death camps. He will talk about his experiences in the choir at Theresienstadt and how music served as a tool of resistance. Terezin was designed as a model ghetto for Jews to show to the outside world. Krasa also survived deportation to Auschwitz and a satellite labor camp. Currently retired, Krasa is involved with the Facing History and Ourselves program to teach students about the Holocaust. He serves on the board of the Terezin Chamber Music Foundation, whose mission is to publicize music created by Jewish composers under the Nazi regime and teach tolerance through music. Edgar and his wife have 2 sons and 4 grandchildren. His story was recently published in the April edition of the Reader's Digest. It gives me great pleasure, and I am honored to welcome Edgar to the Bima to share his story with us. Wherever you want to go.
Good evening to you. I want to talk about another kind of resistance, not an armed resistance as the also heroes performed, but a resistance through participative music that helps us to tolerate the oppression that the Nazis imposed on us. I also want to correct a generally accepted myth that Theresienstadt, as it was called German after the Empress, Habsburg Empress Maria Theresa, it's called also Terezin in Czech, which is shortened. I rather use the Czech description. It was not originally the Germans' plan to make this a showcase to the world. It has happened, and I'll tell you how. I was there. I was one of the, some people may say crazy, who volunteered to go with the very first transport of only 342 people to Terezin. And I went there with a promise that if I volunteer, my parents will be protected from being deported further to the east. That means before the ghetto was even created, the officials at the Jewish Community Center in Prague knew that it's not going to be a ghetto to hold all the Czech Jews, but it's going to be a transition station for further deportations, as they called it, to the east. We knew it's Poland, but nobody had an idea where these transports go, and this lack of knowledge was our luck, because it would have driven us crazy knowing that we have to wait 2, 3, 4 months, years to become gassed. It was the best kept secret the Germans performed. We came, it was 342 of us, all hand-picked men, and these were engineers, technicians, carpenters, plumbers, and 2 cooks. That's why I have been one of the 2, and that's why I had this wonderful promise of protecting my parents, because they needed me. I knew the man who promised it, and I trusted him to the point that if he can and will be able to keep his promise, I'll be ahead of the game, and my parents may survive whatever the odds were for everybody else. We arrived in Terezin. Now, Terezin is a medieval fortress town. It was not created by the Germans or by the Czechs. In 1780, the Habsburgs Empire created it while they were fighting the Protestant Prussians. It was built in an octagon with all the corners in a pointed triangle to see the enemy approach if he comes from any area. It was surrounded by 12-meter thick walls and a moat, and only 3 gates to enter or leave the town, which was an ideal place to hold someone whom we don't want to let escape. We, the 342 of us, entered the town. There was not a railroad station. The fortress did not have a railroad station. The nearest one was 2.5 kilometers away. We walked with the allowed luggage of 110 pounds. I read some in the paper that only 10 pounds was allowed. It was 110 pounds, which is quite heavy to carry for 2.5 kilometers, but it's very little from what you have accumulated through your lifetime. And it mainly consisted of clothing, bedding, and some non-perishable food, because nobody knew when we get the first meal. The town, the inside perimeter of Terezin was, on the inside perimeter were 11 military barracks that between 1918 and 1938, during the Czechoslovakian Republic, housed 5,000 soldiers. In the town were also regular town inhabitants, about 3,000 of them. And the function of those engineers and technicians was to convert the utilities that were serving 8,000 people to satisfy the needs of 60,000. The carpenter's job was to produce triple or quadruple bunks to be able to accommodate as many people as possible. And the 2 cooks had to prepare the kitchens that were neglected for 2 years. And it was very difficult because the 340 people had their jobs assigned, and I couldn't do it all by myself. 6 days after we arrived, a transport of 1,000 people came, whole families. That was good, because in the whole families they consist also of women, and women knew about food and food preparation, although not for 1,000 people, but neither did I. We learned on the job. And after that, every 2 or 3 days, another transport of 1,000 people has come, and when these barracks filled up, the Germans decided to separate women from the men. They went to another barracks, and with the women went girls of all ages and boys under age 14. 15 and up stayed with the men and had to work in the war industry or maintenance of the town. Soon after we have arrived, the first group, a man who was not very significant before the war, a pianist, a chorus conductor, and I want to talk about him. I mean, in the last 50 years you must have heard survivors present their stories or read about it. I want to talk about one who can't tell his story. This man, and I want to name his name because it's nowhere visible. He doesn't have a tombstone, he doesn't have a grave. His name was Raphael Schecter. He was in his upper 30s when he arrived, and we were in those barracks with closed gates. All we had to walk around was a courtyard. And this was because the Germans wanted to prevent us from meeting and mingling with the town population. So he immediately recognized the prison mentality that could set in if you are enclosed. So after everybody performed his assigned job, he collected us, invited us to there were huge cellars, basements in those barracks. He got us men together and started us to sing. We were singing Czech patriotic songs. Why patriotic? Because the Czech Jews were generally very assimilated, and the patriotism was still in us, because 1918, after 400 years, under the Habsburg thumb, they were free. They created a republic and were free. So they were great patriots. This brought us together in a different way than just casual meeting ourselves at work or in the hallway. It transferred us back home, where we have attended musical and cultural activities, and it lasted not only the hour or hour and a half that we were singing and others were listening. We were able to carry some additional strength with us that helped us to endure the loss of freedom, the limitations and restrictions imposed on us. I have to make a step back. Before we came to this ghetto, after the German occupation of the area that's now Czech Republic, they immediately started to impose restrictions, limitations, humiliations, and one of those restrictions and humiliations and deprivations was that after the Jews had to turn in all their valuables, including wedding rings, they had also to turn in musical instruments to deprive them of the pleasure of practicing their favorite occupation. Some of them didn't turn in those instruments. They even smuggled them into Terezin. And because the ghetto was different from concentration camps insofar that there were no German guards inside, the Germans delegated all these responsibilities to the Ältestenrat, to the Council of Elders, who had very little freedom of action and decision-making on their own. But anyway, they managed. So because the German guards were not in town, those musicians, professionals and amateurs, went to different attics and cellars and continued to practice to stay at their proficiency, because the war is going to be over very soon, and they want to stay on the level of their musical, what did I already said, proficiency. But there was nothing that the Germans, that would escape the Germans. They found out. And now, great fear caught everyone in Terezin, because the Germans were able to keep the obedience, the worries by imposing collective punishment. They didn't punish the transgressor alone, they punished the whole family, and nobody wanted their family to suffer for a transgression, so we play along and we may survive and stay with the Germans. But the head of the Council of Elders told the camp commander, why would you want to punish these people? You have all the talent from the whole country accumulated here on this half square mile. Why don't you utilize it by developing a program by which you can show the world how well you treat the Jews? That was the beginning of the German idea, let's make this a showcase. It was not an original plan. Germans did not plan a showcase for Jews. Not only were these people not punished and could retain their instruments, more musical instruments were brought in from the warehouse in Prague. The chamber orchestra was created, several quartets, trios. Jazz has just come from the United States to Europe. A 5-man ghetto swingers was created. I don't think there was dance, but you could listen to it. Not only that, the Germans had no idea what their agreement to this program will develop. A terrific cultural life has started, not only music, there were theaters, cabaret, who threw little darts at the Germans, and it was okay because it was in Czech language. And this, when you can throw something at the Germans, you feel good. Now back to Schecter. I mentioned the women went to another barracks where the gates were closed as well. I don't know how he did it, but he appeared in those barracks. He called together the women and started with them the same thing, singing songs. In June 42, the last of the town inhabitants was evacuated, and the gates have opened, and after we performed our work, we could move around and visit. At that point, in one of the larger basements in the military headquarters, which was during the day used as a carpenter shop, by evening we put up some boards and the choir, mixed choir assembled, and he studied a whole opera from one score that only he had. But that was pretty easy because it's a popular opera, The Battle Bride. Some of you must have heard about it. And every Czech knew part of it, and the rest you learned. And it was unbelievable what this did for, there were clandestine performances. This was before this big program has developed. The Germans brought in not only Czech Jews, suddenly they came German Jews from Germany. And the young and the middle-aged were already deported from Germany directly, so mainly it was the upper middle-aged and old men called the privileged ones. They were not deported to Auschwitz, they were brought to Terezin under a promise, leave everything here, we bring you to a Theresienstadt. You get meals, maid service, laundry, everything you can imagine. And these people, in spite of having seen for 5 years how the Germans treat and restrict the Jews in Germany, they believed them. They believed in the honor of the German word. They came, some had lost limbs in the war. They came with medals on their jacket showing what they did for Germany. But when they came, every single room in the barracks, and in those houses of the town population was already filled. So they only could get a room in the attic of the barracks with a straw mattress on the floor. And those of you who have older parents, grandparents, you know how difficult it is to lay down on the floor, but how much more difficult it is to get up. To get up at night when the light is dim so the earth can sleep. Some of you know that older people have to go more often to the bathroom. If not, ask me, I'll tell you. They had to get up from the mattress, climb over others, go down a flight of stairs, along a hallway to the toilet, and if they couldn't hold it, it's not a subject to talk in a temple about, but it has happened. You can imagine the sanitary and hygienic conditions that have created there, and their impact on diseases and not only the physical diseases. These people were broken because of the German breaking their promise. These people died very fast. But what Schecter did with those Czech singers, he studied the Marriage of Figaro, again only from his score, and the singers had to learn it by heart. And they were going to the areas where these German people were living and performed the opera, also the Magic Flute. He wanted to do the same spiritual uplifting for the German Jews. In February, as the transports came, transports were leaving. And that was always heartbreaking because the Jewish Council of Elders, the Jews had to put together the list of those who should be sent. I wouldn't want this responsibility. I rather cook the improvised meals that we had there. Suddenly in February 1943, the last transport went, and for 5-6 months nothing. So everybody was happy that this is the end of deportations. And Schecter got encouraged also to make a decision. He wants to perform Verdi's Requiem, a Catholic Mass for the dead. A horrific uproar was created in the ghetto. Musicologists, scholars, rabbis, the Council of Elders jumped on him. Why would you, in a Jewish ghetto with Jewish singers, want to perform a Catholic Mass? I had a chance to, and under those conditions, some barter economy has developed. You didn't have money, but you had something. The cooks had some food, the carpenters had some boards, other people had cigarettes. So this was the currency. And I was able, from a carpenter, to get a little wall made in one of the attics, and I roomed with Schecter. It was full of bed bugs, but from human beings, just the two of us, and we had privacy, more privacy than with 40 people in a room. He put in his mind that in the Requiem, in 3 or 4 movements, he interpreted it as a threat, something that he couldn't tell the Germans in German language, but he hoped he can sing it in Latin, like the Day of Wrath. And I want to paraphrase it. When the Supreme Judge will sit in judgment, no sinner will escape. This kind of wording was in the Requiem, and this is what he wanted to throw into the Germans' face. So he was able to, in spite of the uproar, he was able to study. He assembled a 150-member choir. He taught them the Latin words. He taught them the translation. And then on a poor piano, he played the score, the melody for the sopranos, and drilled them until they knew it. Then with the altos, then the male songs. And 6 weeks into this, the rumors sprung up that transports will resume. Now, when transports go, people from all segments of the populations are hit. And so the singers, the choir members, anticipated that a great number of them will have to leave. And they asked Schecter to make, at least for the hard work they put in, make one performance. He wouldn't because it wasn't up to his standard yet. But when it was known that September 6, 5,000 people will be deported, it was sure that a large number of the singers will go. And he made a performance for them and their families. Half of the choir he lost, and he recruited new ones. He didn't have to recruit, people were flocking to him. He had the advantage of auditioning whom he wants and whom he doesn't. He started from the beginning again and lost again and recruited again, and the official premiere of Verdi's Requiem was in January 1944. And after that were 14 more performances, a total of 15, and he was left with 60 singers and an irregular number in each voice, so it couldn't be, as I mentioned, to his standard anymore, so he decided to finish with the performances. Suddenly in July 1944, the camp commander ordered a performance of the Requiem. A lot of high officials, SS from Berlin, from Prague, Vienna, were coming, and also the members of the International Red Cross, whom the Germans have engaged to give them a beautiful report, but I don't have time for this. I can feel it. If you want, I can come again and tell you some more of the other part. But anyway, they made this, they wanted a performance. Now his adrenaline started to flow. He can have them in front of him, just like you sitting there, and he can tell them what he had in his heart and mind. So he quickly put together a few more people, studied, and it was performed, and only the Germans and those Swiss directors of the International Red Cross were present. There was no applause. The performance it gave us a great satisfaction, but we didn't know what the Germans knew. And somebody said they heard Eichmann say, supposedly to another officer, these crazy Jews are singing their own Requiem. And they were right. All of the Jews who left, most of the Jews who left the ghetto for Poland wound up in Auschwitz, Treblinka, Sobibor, and you must have heard the stories. So, you give me 5 more minutes? Those 5,000 that went on September 6th they sang everybody, they sang their own requiem, and they sang the requiem for all 5,000. When we came to Auschwitz, we had to undress and, into sanitary procedure, and we received these striped uniforms, no underwear, no socks, but it looked nice, black and white striped, just a cotton jacket and a pair of cotton pants. These 5,000 could keep their luggage. We had to leave it in the wagon under the promise we'll bring it to your room. And they could have their luggage. They went together to a family camp. I mean, it was a camp which from then on was called a family camp because they never kept families together. They were there 6 months, and after the war we found out they were held there while the Germans negotiated with the Allies for exchange of the German POWs and some heavy trucks that they needed for their war efforts. And when the negotiations broke down, in one night, everybody who was left still alive of those 5,000 went into the gas. So it was a double-edged performance, this requiem, but while it lasted, it was a tremendous uplift. We felt we have really done something to let the Germans know what we're thinking. Schecter, in September 1944, right after this performance, the Germans decided to send all able-bodied people by transport to the east. As a result of the Warsaw Ghetto uprising, they were afraid that these uprisings may occur in other ghettos too, although there was no possibility in the Czech ghetto because the Warsaw prisoners, they had support and cooperation with the Polish underground. There was no underground in Czech Republic. So everybody was deported, the whole Council of Elders, including the man who promised that he will protect my parents, and including myself. And to make it short and on a nice note, my parents were never in a transport. They survived in Terezin, and I, for 40 years, was trying to find out how he did it. I couldn't find the way, but he did it. I'm grateful to him. He himself did not survive. So my presentation of music as a tool of resistance, I hope I transmitted it properly and understandably. My accent, never mind. And are questions allowed? If you have any questions, I'm not my own man here. Maybe next time.
We'll allow questions after the services for those who need to go. After services, they may go. All those who wish to speak with Edgar in the Gaynor Social Hall, as you peruse the exhibits, please do so.